imagine sitting down to like a really healthy, well-portioned dinner. You've got a piece of grilled chicken, a side of fresh tomatoes, maybe some lentils.
Sounds great.
Right. You feel really good about your choices. And then someone tells you that, well, because of the specific blood type flowing through your veins, you basically just ate a plate full of toxic metabolic poison.
Yeah, it's a terrifying thought.
It really is. And that is the staggering promise, and I guess the underlying threat of one of the most alluring concepts in the wellness world, this idea of personalized biology.
Yeah.
For you listening, someone who just wants to cut through all the noise and, find the optimal way to operate, it's just an incredibly seductive idea.
Oh, absolutely.
The thought that you don't have to guess anymore, you take a simple objective blood test, and it hands you the exact customized instruction manual for your unique body.
It is deeply compelling, mostly because it offers certainty in a space that usually feels like, well, absolute chaos. I mean, human bodies aren't identical machines off an assembly line, right?
Yeah, definitely not.
We intuitively know that what makes one person feel really vibrant might make another person feel sluggish and just terrible. And that universal desire for a personalized blueprint is exactly what fueled the phenomenon we are exploring today.
Right. So today's deep dive is zeroing in on the blood type diet, which is a concept that was launched into the stratosphere back in 1996 by naturopath Peter J. DiBonamo with his book, Eat Right for Your Type.
A massive bestseller.
Huge. And we've got a really big stack of sources today, anchored by a super thorough analysis from SpiralSeekr to deconstruct this wildly popular hypothesis. We're going to dig into the biological mechanisms it claims are, pulling the strings, scrutinize the evolutionary history it uses as a foundation, and ultimately see what happened when modern clinical science actually put these claims to the test.
Because today is fundamentally about separating a masterfully constructed narrative from empirical reality. We really have to look past the attractive packaging of personalized wellness and demand to understand the exact physical mechanisms at play here.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we're going to understand it, we really have to start at the cellular level. I was reading through the source material, and the core hypothesis basically argues that our human ABO blood types dictate everything, like from our optimal nutritional intake to our metabolic efficiency, and even our susceptibility to chronic diseases.
Right.
But what actually is the physical trigger here? DiBonamo points the finger at something called lectins.
Yes, the entire biological premise really rests on lectins. To put it simply, lectins are a type of protein found in all kinds of foods, particularly plants, seeds, and legumes. And they have this really unique ability to bind to carbohydrates.
Okay.
Now, in DiBonamo's framework, these dietary lectins are dangerous because they supposedly interact with the specific antigens present in your blood.
Hold on, let me stop you there real quick because I want to make sure I'm picturing this correctly.
Right.
When we talk about antigens in relation to blood types, what exactly are we looking at? Are they like little chemical ID badges on the outside of our blood cells?
That is exactly how you should picture them. Yeah. Antigens are basically molecular identification tags protruding from the surface of your red blood cells. So if you have type A blood, you have the A antigen tag. Type B has the B tag. Type AB obviously has both. And then type O is categorized by the actual absence of those specific A or B tags.
Okay, so I have these ID tags on my cells, and I eat a food containing lectins. What does DiBonamo claim actually happens next?
He claims that if you consume lectins that are biologically incompatible with your specific blood type, it triggers a catastrophic process called cellular agglutination.
Which is a very, very clinical, heavy word.
It is, yeah. But physically, agglutination just means clumping. It's cells sticking together when they absolutely shouldn't be.
Oh, wow.
DiBonamo posits this whole lock and key mechanism. He argues that if you eat the wrong food, the lectin proteins enter your bloodstream, seek out the specific antigens on your blood cells, bind to them, and essentially just glue your blood cells together. Right. And this microclumping supposedly creates a cascade of metabolic disruption, inflammation, and eventual chronic disease.
So it's almost like, well, is the theory basically saying that feeding the wrong food to your blood type is like putting diesel fuel into an unleaded engine?
That's a great way to put it.
Like it just violently rejects it. It's not just that the fuel is slightly less efficient. It physically gunks up the machinery because the chemical structure of the fuel doesn't match the specific engineering of the engine.
Yes, exactly. The diesel and unleaded comparison really captures the mechanical severity of what he's proposing. It is a violent physical incompatibility.
Right.
And if DiBonamo believed the cellular glue was wreaking havoc on our bodies, he had to figure out exactly which foods triggered which blood types. His answer to that puzzle was to look backward. like way backward. He tied this entire mechanism to human evolutionary history.
And this is where he builds out those 4 highly specific dietary blueprints. He claims that different blood types emerged at very distinct eras in human development. So if we want to avoid this clumping, we have to, I guess, mimic the diets of our specific ancestors who first mutated that blood type. Let's look at the first one, which he calls type O, the hunter.
Right. So according to this evolutionary timeline, type O is the oldest, most ancestral blood type. Dalmo claims it originated from early, rugged hunter-gatherer populations. Therefore, the biological engine of a type O is supposedly optimized for a heavy, high-protein diet.
So like a lot of lean meats, poultry, and fish. It's very similar to what we'd recognize today as a strict paleo diet.
Very similar, yeah.
We all know the basics of paleo, but the restrictions here are intense. Dalmo says type Os must completely restrict grains, especially wheat, as well as dairy products and legumes. Why? Because those foods supposedly contain the specific lectins that will agglutinate type O blood.
And he builds an entire physiological profile around this hunter identity. He proposes that type O individuals naturally possess highly active immune systems and robust, highly acidic digestive tracts to break down all that meat.
Makes sense for a hunter.
Right, but conversely, they are uniquely vulnerable to things like ulcers and thyroid dysfunction. To manage this underphysiology, the exercise recommendation is vigorous, high-intensity aerobic activity, things like martial arts, heavy lifting, sprinting.
Okay, so that's the ancient, rugged hunter. But then, as human society evolves, we supposedly get the emergence of type A, which he dubs the Agrarian. And this type is theorized to have mutated during the massive human transition from nomadic hunting into early settled agricultural societies.
Which means the required fuel shifts entirely. For the type A agrarian, the optimal diet flips to being primarily plant-based. The engine is no longer built for meat.
Right.
The emphasis is on vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes, basically the foods of the farmer.
And this is where he gets incredibly rigid. If you are a type A, red meat and dairy aren't just discouraged. Dalmo claims they are literally toxic to you.
Because in this narrative, the agrarian digestive tract is too sensitive. He claims type A individuals lack the stomach acid of the hunters, meaning red meat just sits in their gut, rots, and drastically increases their predisposition toward cardiovascular disease and cancer.
Wow.
Yeah. And fitting that calmer, settled agrarian profile, the exercise recommendations shift drastically from sprinting and lifting to centering low-impact exercises like yoga, tai chi, and golf.
It's a very cinematic way to look at the grocery store, I have to admit. But then we hit type B, the nomad, and here's where it gets really interesting and where I start to raise an eyebrow at the logic. Dalmo links type B to nomadic populations that migrated across brutal, diverse climates. Because they were constantly moving through different environments, he claims they developed a highly flexible, omnivorous digestive system to survive.
Exactly. They get the most varied intake of all the groups. Notably, type B is the only blood type in his entire system that is permitted to consume dairy products freely.
Lucky them.
Right. They can handle lean meats. They can handle certain grains. It's presented as a very tolerant biological engine.
Right. But there's a catch, and it's a weird one. Nomads must avoid corn, wheat, lentils, and chicken.
Yep. Chicken.
I was reading this and I had to stop. Chicken is practically the universal diet food. Why ban it for nomads? Why on earth would the highly flexible nomad engine seize up if you feed it a grilled chicken breast?
It does seem completely counterintuitive, especially when they're allowed to eat dairy and mutton. But it brings us right back to his central mechanism, lectins.
Ah.
Dalmo claims that chicken muscle tissue contains one very specific agglutinating lectin, and he argues that this exact lectin is uniquely harmful to the type B antigen. So while they can process almost anything else, that one specific protein in poultry will supposedly cause their blood cells to clump and trigger devastating autoimmune diseases.
Wow. Okay, it's a very, very specific lock and key. And just to round it out, we have the fourth profile, type AB, which he calls the Enigma.
Right. The Enigma is described as a very recent evolutionary adaptation. It's essentially a genetic hybrid resulting from the intermingling of the type A agrarian and the type B nomad populations.
So the diet is basically a Frankenstein mashup. They can eat tofu and seafood like type A, and they can handle dairy like type B, but they have to avoid red meat due to their type A traits and avoid corn and seeds due to their type B traits.
It's a complex balancing act for sure. He claims they inherited the low stomach acid of the agrarian farmer, but the meat adaptation of the nomad, so they have to eat smaller, more frequent meals just to process their food.
All right, I see the appeal. These profiles are meticulously detailed, they are logically structured, they have this sweeping, epic evolutionary backstory, and they give you a crystal clear list of rules. Eat this, don't eat that.
Humans love rules.
We really do. But here is where we have to shift gears. Because it's one thing to write a best-selling book with a cool theory. It is another thing entirely to put that theory under a microscope. What happens when clinical science actually tests these beautifully organized blueprints?
That is where the narrative hits a brick wall. According to the research compiled in our sources, the scientific and medical consensus categorizes the blood type diet as an entirely unsupported hypothesis.
Meaning, wait, none of it holds up.
Absolutely none of it. Nutritional science does not validate the core mechanisms, and clinical trials do not validate the health outcomes.
That's rough.
Let's look at the timeline of the data. In 2013, a major systematic review was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Researchers scoured all the available scientific literature looking for any empirical evidence that supported blood type diets. Their final conclusion was devastatingly brief. They found no evidence to validate the purported health benefits. None. Okay, but no evidence just means they didn't find any proof it works. It doesn't necessarily prove it doesn't work, right? But the sources detail a massive follow-up study from 2014 conducted by researchers at the University of Toronto, and this is where things get really illuminating.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that the Toronto study is really the nail in the coffin because of its sheer scale and methodology. They tracked 1,455 subjects over an extended period.
That's a huge sample size.
Huge! They took detailed dietary questionnaires, mapped out exactly what these people were eating, took their blood types, and then measured their cardiometabolic markers.
Wait, cardiometabolic markers, just so we are all on the same page. For anyone listening, we're talking about the standard dashboard of metabolic health, right? Things like blood pressure, cholesterol levels, insulin resistance, waist circumference.
Correct. The vital signs that tell us if a diet is actually making you healthier or pushing you toward heart disease and diabetes. And the researchers made a fascinating observation. They found that adherence to some of the diets, most notably the type A plant-based agrarian diet, did indeed improve those cardiometabolic markers.
Really?
Yeah. People's blood pressure dropped, their cholesterol improved, people actually got healthier.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this. If people got healthier eating the type A diet, doesn't that vindicate Diadamo? Doesn't that prove the diet works?
Only if you stop looking at the data halfway through. What
Yeah.
the Toronto researchers found, and this is the crucial part, is that these health improvements occurred completely independently of the subject's actual blood types.
Wait, so let me play devil's advocate for a second. Are you saying that if a type O hunter, the person whose engine is supposedly designed exclusively for heavy meat and who will suffer massive inflammation if they eat grains, if that type O person ate the type A agrarian plant-based diet of tofu and beans, they still saw the exact same health improvements as the type A person?
Yes, exactly. The benefits of the plant-based diet applied across the board universally, whether the person had type A blood, type O blood, or type B blood. The Toronto study beautifully isolated the variables. It proved that a good diet works because the nutritional profile of the food is inherently healthy. It has absolutely nothing to do with those foods matching your blood antigens.
The diesel fuel actually made the unleaded engine run better. The entire mechanical analogy completely shatters in a clinical setting.
It shatters completely. The data proves the intervention works for the wrong reasons. So, if the clinical trials definitively show the diet fails to perform as advertised regarding blood types, we have to look backward. We have to ask, where did Diadamo's foundational science go wrong? How did he build such an elaborate house of cards?
And the data points to two massive structural flaws in his foundation. Let's tackle the first one, his epic evolutionary timeline. He claims the ancient rugged hunter was type O and the modern settled farmer was type A. But modern genetics tells a totally different story.
A completely contradictory story, actually. Diadamo wrote his book in the mid-90s, well before we had comprehensive genomic sequencing. Today, phylogenetic network analysis, which traces the evolutionary history of our genes, indicates that the A allele is actually the oldest.
No way.
Yes, type A is likely the ancestral human blood type. A type O is a later genetic mutation, essentially a deletion of the A and B antigens.
Wait, so the entire foundational narrative, the rugged ancient type O hunter evolving into the more modern type A farmer, is completely flipped by modern genetics. The so-called farmer blood type is actually older than the hunter blood type.
Yes. This raises an important question, doesn't it, about how easy it is to build a compelling narrative on top of flawed foundational science. And gets worse for the hypothesis. Genomic data shows that the genetic divergence of these blood groups, the splitting off into A, B, and O, happened millions of years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it vastly predates the human invention of agriculture, which only happened about 10,000 years ago. Dietary used the shift to agriculture as the defining trigger for the type A mutation. But the mutation already existed long before anyone ever planted a field of wheat.
It is genuinely wild how easy it is to build a compelling, logical-sounding narrative on top of fundamentally flawed science. If you believe the premise, the whole structure makes sense. But the premise is a ghost.
Which brings us to the second structural flaw. We have to dismantle the supposed physical weapon of this diet, the Lectin Fallacy. Dietary's whole theory rests on dietary lectins causing cellular agglutination blood clumping if you eat the wrong foods.
Now, to be fair, lectins are real. They are real proteins, and if you consume them raw, they can be dangerous. The classic textbook example is raw kidney beans. If you eat a handful of raw kidney beans, the lectins in them will cause severe gastrointestinal distress. You will get very sick.
That is absolutely true. But Dietary ignores a massive fundamental reality of human digestion and food preparation. We don't eat raw kidney beans, we cook our food.
Right, but how exactly does cooking solve the lectin problem? Does it just, wash them away?
It destroys their structure. It's a process called denaturing. Lectins are proteins folded into very specific 3D shapes. That shape is what allows them to act like a key fitting into the lock of your cells. When you apply intense heat like boiling or roasting, the thermal kinetic energy literally breaks the weak bonds holding that protein together. The shape warps and unravels.
So it's like taking a metal key and melting it with a blowtorch. It might still be made of metal, but the teeth are completely gone. It can never fit into the lock again.
Precisely. Once cooked, the vast majority of dietary lectins are completely neutralized. They can no longer bind to anything.
That makes total sense.
Right. And beyond the cooking factor, there is zero biochemical evidence that dietary lectins agglutinate blood cells in vivo, meaning inside a living, breathing human body based on ABO antigens. Even if a few lectins survive the cooking process, your stomach acid breaks them down further. They aren't making it into your bloodstream to glue your cells together. The clumping simply isn't happening.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at the wreckage here. We've debunked the clinical results with the massive Toronto study. We've debunked the evolutionary history using modern genomic sequencing. And we've completely dismantled the cellular mechanism by understanding how heat denatures lectins. The science is a total failure.
It is a complete failure.
Yet, and this is the million-dollar question for you listening, if you were sitting there thinking, but wait, my aunt went on the type of diet, she followed the rules, and she lost 20 pounds and her joint pain went away, so you guys are wrong. We hear you. Millions of people swear by this diet. How do we reconcile the total scientific failure with genuine, passionate, undeniably real human success stories?
We reconcile it by correctly identifying why they're experiencing that success. We shouldn't dismiss your aunt's lived experience. Her health genuinely improved. But the research calls this the mechanism of perceived efficacy. It means the intervention works, but absolutely not for the reasons Dietary thinks it works.
So what's the real reason?
Look at the actual dietary recommendations across all 4 of the profiles. Whether you are a type O hunter, a type A agrarian, a type B nomad, or a type AB Enigma, what do all 4 of those diets have in common? What do they all strictly forbid?
Ultra-processed foods, refined sugars, fast food. They all eliminate the standard modern junk diet.
Exactly. Every single one of his blueprints forces you to stop eating processed garbage and replaces it with whole foods, vegetables, and lean proteins. If you take a person who eats a standard Western diet full of hyperpalatable, highly processed foods, and you put them on any of the 4 blood type diets, their health is going to dramatically improve.
Because they are suddenly experiencing the universal biological benefits of calorie restriction, increased fiber, and high-quality macronutrients.
Exactly. The health benefits are real, but they are the result of general dietary improvement. They have absolutely nothing to do with a magical synergistic interaction with your blood antigens. The blood type framing is just the packaging.
So what does this all mean? It means if you stop eating junk food, you're going to feel amazing, regardless of what's swimming in your veins. But man, what incredible packaging it is. It gives people a sense of identity, saying, I'm a nomad, I have a tolerant digestive system, but I can't eat chicken, feels so much more engaging than just saying, I'm trying to eat more salads. It turns mundane grocery shopping into an epic extension of your biological identity.
It is brilliant marketing. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it emphasizes why critical thinking is essential in the face of info overload. While that sense of identity might be a powerful motivator to keep you away from the junk food aisle, it is vital that we understand the actual science behind our choices. We have to separate the intervention eating whole foods from the story blood type magic. Relying on an unsupported hypothesis, no matter how engaging the story is, can lead to unnecessary restrictions and nutritional anxiety.
Let's distill all of this. We started this deep dive with a captivating 1996 hypothesis that promised to decode our personalized nutritional needs based on our ABO blood types. We explored the incredibly detailed profiles of the hunter, the agrarian, the nomad, and the Enigma.
Right.
We examined the proposed mechanism of lectins acting like the wrong fuel in an engine, clumping our blood and causing disease.
And then we subjected that narrative to the modern scientific consensus. We saw how phylogenetic network analysis proved the evolutionary timeline was completely backward.
Flip flipped.
Yeah. We explored how the simple act of cooking denatures the dreaded lectins, destroying their ability to bind to our cells. And finally, we looked at massive clinical trials that proved any health benefits observed were the result of eating whole foods, completely independent of blood type.
For you listening, this deep dive is a powerful reminder. Shortcuts, hacks, and highly personalized biological blueprints are incredibly tempting. We all want the secret code, but the fundamentals of good nutrition remain stubbornly, wonderfully universal. Eating whole foods, minimizing ultra-processed junk, and finding an active lifestyle you enjoy that is the real, empirically proven instruction manual for your body. You don't need a blood test to give you permission to eat more vegetables.
That's right. The foundational truths of human health rarely require a highly complex, customized, restrictive framework. They just require consistency with the basics.
I completely agree. But I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to chew on today. We know that human beings deeply crave order, structure, and personalization. We want to feel unique. If a standard, frankly boring diet of just eating more whole foods is rebranded as a highly customized biological blueprint, are we simply more likely to stick to it because it makes us feel biologically special and scientifically understood? Is the real magic of the blood type diet just a master class in behavioral psychology? Think about it. The next time you're looking for the perfect fuel for your engine, ask yourself, are you actually chasing the science, or do you just really want to be part of a good story?